Hello, and welcome to Flunking the Written, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans discuss their favorite show, episode by episode, scene by scene. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Megan, and before we get started, we want all of our listeners to know that this is a fully spoiled podcast. That means at any point during our discussion, we may bring up any part of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and its spinoff, Angel.
So if you haven't watched both shows and are sensitive to spoilers, go catch up on some of the greatest television ever created and come back here when you're done.
With that out of the way, let's jump right into this week's episode of Flunking the Written. Alright, so we're going to get into our discussion of I, Robot, You, Jane, which was written by Ashley Gable and Thomas S. Sweden, and it was directed by Stephen Posey. This episode, Kim, you mentioned you enjoyed, but it's kind of a not liked episode.
Yeah, and it's not real exciting and stuff, but Willow has always been one of my favorite characters, and this is one of my favorite first season episepisodes.
Yeah, well,
I say first season episode because
it's a very specific.
The first season isn't really the greatest.
Well, I will say that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It kind of lands in a similar place as Never Kill a Boy on the First Date for me. Mm-hmm. It's very much in that vein. It's not a great episode, but it's got some great dialogue, and it has one of my favorite quotes from Buffy of all time, and we'll get to that when we get to that section of the episode. But before we...
Oh, I'm looking forward to see what that is.
It's absolute. I adore it. Before we get into the episode, though, I need to read the blurb, which is Willow unwittingly unleashes a powerful demon named Moloch onto the internet, where he turns Sunnydale's computer crowd into his helpless pawns.
Pretty accurate. It leaves out the stuff about Willow, but other than that, pretty accurate.
Yeah, I feel like if this blurb was written today, it would be more like, Willow meets a boy online, and then kind of leave some mystery to it. But this is very much just a summary more than a teaser, which is how all of these have been. This is also another episode that is sans Cordelia.
Yeah, that's true. No Cordelia in this one.
And I feel her void every time she's gone. All right, so we start in Cortona, Italy in 1418 with a demon that we come to know as Moloch, who summons Carlo and asks, "Do you love me?"
Yeah, he's a demon who very much wants to be worshipped.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of approaching a demon, where the demon is seeking love and affection from its followers than to kill them. It's kind of a very hands-on sacrificial lamb scenario. But Moloch seems to be into it, so to each his own.
Yeah, because we have the destructive demons and then the just evil demons who want to corrupt everybody. And this one, he wants you to worship him. Mm-hmm. He is very, very clear about that. And then we have a group of monks. There are a lot of monks in the Buffyverse.
Yeah.
A lot of them. We have a group of monks who are doing a ceremony to bind this demon, Moloch, into a book. And they are successful. They do it.
So here's the thing that I have a problem with. This idea of sealing a demon away in boxes is something that repeats in season 2 as well with the judge. They cut the judge up and then they put him in boxes and they scattered him. When you learn more about the Buffyverse, you learn more about the fact that there are multiple dimensions. And if some of these things are as bad as they're said to be, wouldn't you figure out a way to get rid of them that way? By just putting those things in other dimensions.
Yeah, you would think. The dimensions don't really play a part in Buffy, though. Mostly Angel.
Yeah, you get a lot of commentary about multiple dimensions, but you don't actually visit multiple dimensions in Buffy.
Yeah, that seems like more like something they would do in an episode of Angel, hide something in another dimension.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you cut the judge apart and then put each part in a different dimension. That would be tricky to get him back together.
Much more difficult to put him back together that way.
So we cut to the library, and Buffy opens the box to find the Moloch book. and a bunch of the computer class students are in the library scanning in all of these, I guess, new additions to the library. It's not really clear exactly what they're doing, but they're cataloging in some way virtually books that have come into the library. And this is when we meet Jenny Calendar.
For the very first time, yes. And just so you know, in the script book, Miss Calendar's name is not Jenny, it's Nikki.
Oh.
And throughout this entire script, they call her Nikki. And every time I read it, I was like, yeah, that's not her name. They never actually use her first name in this episode. They just call her Miss Calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure exactly when she gets renamed, but in this script, her name is Nikki Calendar.
That's fun.
So in this scene, when Buffy sees the book, they give it to Willow, and Giles says, I haven't gone through the new arrivals, put it in that pile, and points to Willow. But here's my question. Why does Giles have this book?
Yeah.
Like, somebody obviously found this book hidden somewhere. Weird book with a literal monster on the cover and weird language inside it. Why is it not sent to an archaeologist or an anthropologist somewhere or a museum or something? Why does the local Sunnydale High School library get this book?
I want to know Giles's book ordering habits in general. Like, how does he add to that collection? Because I assume he has some budget, but instead of actually ordering any books that students would be interested in, just figures out a way to spend it on old, archaic books.
Which I'm guessing he has some kind of way to order them, and that would be interesting to know. You have a point, but why did this book come to him? Like, it makes no sense. That this book should be being studied by, like, a team of archaeologists and anthropologists at, like, the oldest museum in whatever country it was found in.
Well,
but instead, he's just like, put it in that pile by the high school students.
And it also makes it seem like that box hasn't been opened since it was originally sealed in there. So that further complicates things, because in this scenario, he's just getting a random box.
And then there's a conversation about how Giles doesn't like computers and he's stuck in the past and computers are the future.
Mm-hmm.
I just sit in this whole conversation. I wonder what Giles would think of smartphones and social media, because he is not happy with this late 90s style little box
I
computer.
imagine the thing that is most offensive to Giles is Spotify. I imagine he hates Spotify.
Quite possibly.
So yeah, it's such a random set of circumstances, right? We're not used to other kids being in the library. We're not used to all these computers being set up everywhere. There's this other teacher who we've never seen before. It really feels like a fish out of water kind of episode where it's throwing so much at you so fast, because you also have the introduction of both Dave and Fritz, who play significant roles in this story. And it's just like, here's 3 new characters, bam, right out the gate.
And you're kind of like, why are these people in my library?
Yeah, this is not cool. I also made a note that I just think it's funny that whenever they need a computer, there just magically is a computer on that center table in the library, but then there's never one there anytime that they're not in need of a computer. So it's just very convenient computer placement. If the scene calls for a computer will be there. Otherwise, there's no computers in that library.
That is true. Later, there's a computer, like, permanently set up behind the desk, the checkout desk, though.
Mm-hmm.
And they use that one a lot. This episode, and I have this in my notes a little bit further on, but this episode, the computer technology stuff in it really, really dates this episode. Like, you can tell this is from the 90s with these computers.
It's also, like, horribly inconsistent within the episode, too.
Yeah.
So my favorite bit of computer tech in this episode is right here in this scene. Because once Willow gets to scanning, we see that it is the Scan-O-Matique that she is using, which is spelled SCAN-O-MATIQUE, which is just brilliant. I love it so much.
Yes. Yes. Now, was that a real thing? I wonder.
I don't think so. I think there may have been a Scan-O-Matic, and they decided to do Matique. I don't know, but it just delights me to no end. One thing to note, though, before we get to the scanning, is this the first time that Xander casually drops a "I love you" to Willow? Because there's a real casual
I'm not sure,
"I love
but
you."
I noticed that too.
There's a real
It
casual
was a very
"I love
friendly.
you." Yeah.
Willow, I love you, but bye.
Yeah.
But yes, he drops that, and I noticed, and I was watching very closely because I wanted to see Willow's face, but it doesn't really have her have an expression or anything special.
There's actually a lot in this scene that we've kind of fogged over. You have, of course, Fritz being way too into technology.
Information isn't bound up anymore. It's an entity. The only reality is virtual. If you're not jacked in, you're not alive.
And Jenny calling him out on that, which is nice. I think Jenny works very quickly, and I think it takes seconds for you to realize that they're going somewhere with Jenny and Giles. I mean, they're so singularly focused on each other with pretty much every bit of their dialogue.
And then when everyone leaves the library, Willow scans the book that was set beside her. It doesn't show her opening the book, and I'm assuming with Willow's knowledge of demons and the things that go bump in the night, she would see the front of this book, that there's a monster on it, and not do anything with it. But it shows her just scanning it in there, and she just scans 2 pages.
Yeah.
And then closes the book.
Doesn't even scan the entire page. There's part of that text that's cut off, and it's the most infuriating thing. It's
I saw that, and I just
OCD.
assumed that maybe her scanner thing got it all or something. Has a radius past where it is. I don't know. That's what I assumed when I saw that. But then she doesn't turn the page. She opens this book to the middle, scans 2 pages, and closes the book.
Which makes me what is this weird filing system that they're doing? I could understand if they were scanning the first couple of pages, because that is a way that you could reference at least the beginning part of the book and understand, oh, this is the book for me, this is the book I'm looking for. But just 2 random pages in the middle, there's no clear indication of what on earth that could be good for.
Yeah, I agree.
Listen, everything to do with technology in this episode is terrible, and we're just gonna have to accept that early on and not spend too much time trying to dig through the weeds and try to figure out justifications for any of it, because it is all
but we're gonna have
awful.
We're gonna have to at least mention it.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be fun to mention, but we don't need to try to clarify why it's bad, because it's just universally accepted at this point that this is bad technology.
Well, Willow scans the book, and then all of a sudden the screen on her computer goes black, and then words appear saying, "Where am I?" And there's no text box or chat window or anything. It's just words in the middle of the screen. Where am I? Which I'm assuming, it doesn't show us if Willow saw this or anything, but I'm assuming if she did, she might think it was weird.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I would assume. Okay, so after credits, we're in the Sunnydale High Hall, and Buffy is running after Willow, and they are both in outfits that completely scream their personalities to me.
Yes, I have written 3 times in my notes for this episode are Buffy and Willow in different seasons.
Yes.
Buffy is dressed like it's August, and Willow is dressed like it's November. It's just so weird.
Yeah. I love Willow's outfit, though, and this, everything about it, the weird, floral skirt, the purple tights, everything about it is just adorable. But this further proves that there is no dress code in Sunnydale High at all, because Buffy is wearing the most see-through tank top that you've ever seen. Just a sheer white tank top over a tiny, tiny skirt. And you're just yep.
Yeah. But they run into each other and start talking, and we find out Willow has met a boy. Yes. And she is so excited, and he's so great and romantic and smart, and he's just everything.
I cease to care about anything in this scene when I see the picture of Willow and Giles in Willow's locker.
I did not see that.
It's so
There's a picture of them
precious. It's just the most awkward, side by side looking at the camera. But there's a picture of Willow and Giles in Willow's locker, and it says so much about Willow, and I love it.
That is hilarious. Okay, I I'm going to have to turn the episode back on and fast forward to that part just to see that.
But I did make the comment that the conversation, pretty much everything going on here is just the most teenage girl thing I ever did see. And I will say, like, I feel like overall, this episode really made Buffy, Willow, and Xander feel like teenagers, more so than other episodes do, because a lot of times we talk about how it frames them more as adults or in college or anything like that, even though they're all technically supposed to be 16. But I think this one, they kind of felt more like their age for a good chunk of it, which I think is interesting. I don't know if it's a welcome change, but it is something I noted.
Well, we get to where Buffy asks what he looks like, and Willow's like, I don't know. And we see Buffy try to figure it out, and they have a discussion about how Willow met him online, and they've been talking, and she met him right after the computer lab project. And one thing to note is that they walk into the computer science classroom, and the character Dave is talking to his computer screen, saying, yes, I promise I will, which is weird.
Yeah, this episode is so over the top with its, like, menace and just uncomfortable, like, situations. The Fritz character, of course, is the biggest. Like, he is just so... Woof.
Yeah, there's something wrong with him to begin with.
Yeah. He was
there has to be.
He was definitely in the pool for I'm gonna be worshiping a demon at some point in my life. Like that was his who's who in the Sunnydale yearbook for sure.
I agree. Miss Callender comes in to start the class, and she's like, "Hey, Buffy, what are you doing in my class?" And Buffy says she's got a free period, so Miss Callender marks herself as the cool teacher by, well, that's okay, but this is lab time, so make it a short visit.
Yes.
So she's like, oh, well, this is the nice, relaxed, go with the flow teacher.
Yeah. Right before that, though, this is something I observed. But Buffy's just like, okay, so you're dating a guy, but you don't know what he looks like. Okay, this is a puzzle. I'm good at these. Does it involve a midget and a block of ice? And when I hear that, suddenly I'm much more accepting of all of her crazy leaps to, like, the praying mantis lady or the hyena people, because I don't know how she got to a midget and a block of ice.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because how in the world does that equal dating someone you don't know what they look like?
So Willow opens up an email while she's at her computer, and it says that it's from Malcolm and that he's thinking of her. And Willow is like fretting about all of this and being very, normal about this as like it's a regular dating scenario. But Buffy is super weird about it. And some of it could be that what you were saying where the internet's a new thing. But I feel like this is not a place for Buffy to be judgmental of Willow's dating choices.
I actually see what you're saying, and that would very much be valid today, or even in like 2010. But I think in the time period, I think that was the reaction most people had from dating online. Mm-hmm. Like, to automatically wonder, is that the real person? Yeah. Because it's Xander's first reaction, too. Although his has a lot to do with jealousy. It is his first reaction, too. I don't know. I didn't really see that. I kind of thought of it as a normal reaction in 1997 to someone saying they've met someone online.
Yeah. I just think that it's weird because it's just the reality that these characters are in, but Buffy having a crush on a vampire is framed as less, like, weird or dangerous in her mind than Willow talking with somebody online.
Okay. Yeah. True, but I still think it might have been the time period.
Yeah. I mean, there's clearly, like, they didn't have a clue on most of the
yeah, because this was like 23 years ago. And the internet you didn't really date on the internet then. Yeah. But I like how Willow is trying to think of a reply to him, and she's like, I'm thinking of you too. Oh no, I can't write that. That's stupid. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I remember. I've been there as like a teenager in college trying to write a reply in a message for an email or a text, or there wasn't really texting when I was in college, but yeah, trying to write replies and stuff like that. I wrote in my notes, I'm like, I remember being there.
Yeah.
Poor Willow.
There's something to that, right? There's something to, if you have the time to think about a reply, the most obvious reply seems like it's not good enough. And Willow is clearly the biggest overthinker. I'm not sure she ever replied to him. This is the fun part about this episode. My favorite, weird thing, weird Easter egg thing. But they pull up the info. Moloch pulls up the info on Buffy. And if you freeze frame and read all the info, it's all horribly inaccurate. But then you go to another scene, and they pull up what is presumably supposed to be that same info, which is also horribly inaccurate, but it's also different info from the first scene. So it lists
when he looks at Buffy's student file.
It lists 2 different birth dates. Neither one are her actual birth date. In one, she's listed as a sophomore, which is right. The other one, she's listed as a senior. But I think the thing that bothers me the most out of any of this is that she is listed as having 1 absence. And I know that's inaccurate.
I saw the 1 absence thing, and I was like, that does not look right.
Yeah. Maybe the teachers just never take attendance.
Possibly. Well, so Willow and Buffy keep talking about Malcolm, which is what the demon has named himself. There is a line where they're talking about maybe what he looks like, and Willow says that stuff really doesn't matter if you care about each other. And she says, maybe I'm not his ideal either. That shows a little bit of Willow's insecurity, but I really like that they changed that line from what it was in the original script. Because in the original script, Willow says, maybe I'm not his ideal of a babe either. Or maybe I'm not his ideal babe either. And I'm glad they changed that. Because, cringy.
Yeah, we have enough cringe in this episode without that line. Yeah. I do like the line, though. He doesn't talk like someone who would have a hairy back.
And then I find myself wondering what someone who has a hairy back would talk like. Mm-hmm. We have Miss Calendar talking about how Fritz and Dave are having a lot of computer time, and he tells them they're working on a new project.
Ooh, will I be excited?
You'll die.
Now, why is this not addressed? Because that's a weird thing for a high school student to say to his teacher.
Well, clearly, this, proves your theory that Fritz was already messed up, because Jenny has no reaction to this either. She's just like, okay. So in the next scene, I'm really excited. We meet
I like this.
My favorite Buffy meme, which is the guy on the laptop on the staircase. And there's a meme out there that is simply, I forget how old Buffy is until I see this guy with this laptop. But he is reading his paper, and the title is Nazi Germany, the Model of a Well-Ordered Society.
Yeah, and he's like, I didn't write that. Which I think if you wrote that, even in the 90s, if you had wrote that as a paper and turned it in, you might be called to the counselor's office to discuss some things. Even back then.
Yeah. It does show that Moloch is actually taking advantage of the internet access and learning all of this stuff. I don't know why he's randomly punking this kid. Just haha, I'm changing your essay. That seems like kind of a weird, petty way of going about it, but...
And then we have Xander and Willow talk for a little while about what they're going to do that night. And Willow's like, no, I'm going to make it an early night. I don't want to go out. And Xander mentions Malcolm and that he heard, which obviously heard because Buffy told him. And you can tell that Xander is not thrilled that Willow has somebody.
He's also very flirty with Willow at the very beginning of this interaction, which is weird. It's very playfully flirty. It could definitely be more of a friendship flirt than a romantic flirt. He, catches her and just, guess who? And, pokes her and stuff like that. It's very much like a boy who doesn't really know how to flirt trying to flirt. But it's very precious in its own way. And that's kind of it's a weird thing where you think that they're going to set up more with the Willow-Xander relationship in this episode, and then at a certain point they just kind of stop doing that, because they have the little moment where he's like, I love you, but bye, and then you have this where he's kind of a little bit jealous, and Buffy even calls him out on it. But then after that, that pretty much completely goes away.
Yeah. Did Xander and Buffy talk about, basically Xander being jealous?
Yeah.
That happens right after that. And and they start discussing about how they don't know anything about this guy.
Sure, he says he's a high school student, but I can say I'm a high school student.
You are.
Okay, but I can also say that I'm an elderly Dutch woman. Get me? I mean, who's to say I'm not if I'm in the elderly Dutch chat room?
I get your point. Oh, this guy could be anybody. He could be weird or crazy or old, or he could be a circus freak. He's probably a circus freak.
Yeah, I mean, we read about it all the time. You know, people meet on the net, they talk, they get together, have dinner, a show, horrible axe murder.
It does do the thing that I appreciate, the fact that they do realize at the end of that conversation, they were like, oh, we're overreacting.
Yeah.
And it's almost a game at that point between the two of them. All of this interaction from Xander and Willow, and then Willow kind of bailing, and then Xander and Buffy and all of that, it's all like, this is the scene that I'm just like, man, they're really kind of like teenagers here. And I especially like the moment when Buffy comes up and Xander asks Buffy if she's going to be at the Bronze, and then says, no, she's probably slaying or something. And it's just like, everybody deserts me. And it's just like the most whiny, angsty teenager thing. But pretty much everything throughout this entire section, I'm just like, yep, this
teenagers.
This is their like peak teenager interaction period, right? I mean, Buffy's calling Xander out on his feelings or his wanting to be the center of attention. Like it all really kind of feels very appropriate for their age, which is different than what we normally frame these characters as.
This is a very bunch of teenagers episode. And there's others like that too, but they're not all the time. The next scene is Fritz kind of in a dark room, sitting at the computer, repeating over and over again, I'm jacked in, I'm jacked in, I'm jacked in, while carving an M for Moloch in his arm.
And I laugh. I shouldn't laugh because there's nothing really funny about this. If this scene was played right, it would be a terrible thing to witness, and it kind of works, but it's kind of become such a meme, and it's so over the top in its portrayal that it doesn't really land the way it should.
I can see what they were going for, but it doesn't work out.
It really kind of loses the message somewhere just because of how intense Fritz is, and the line especially is just very memeable. But yeah, when you're getting worship to the level where people are cutting themselves, then that is definitely a very dark place for this episode to go. And this episode goes to some really dark places, like a lot of season 1 episodes do.
Well, okay, so before we do the next scene, I want to say something. I noticed here, and obviously it's a demon, but Willow seems to be falling into a very toxic relationship with Malcolm. Mm-hmm. And I wrote in my notes as I was watching the show the red flags that I saw for it.
Yep.
For like being in a toxic relationship. And I know that's like completely obvious because it's demon. But at this point, Willow and Buffy don't know that. But this is the very first one in the next scene where Willow comes running in and she's late to class and says, I overslept. And Buffy's like, till 5th period, talking to Malcolm last night. And it's the first red flag where it's behavior changes. Mm-hmm. And what you would normally do. So they're talking, and Buffy's like, this is just not like you. And Willow says, not like me to have a boyfriend. And Willow gets defensive. And Buffy's just like, I just want you to be sure. Yeah. And Willow claims, we really care about each other. Big deal if I blow off a couple of classes. So right away, that's the second red flag. He's got her line. And then in the very next sentence is the next one. Willow, Malcolm said you wouldn't understand. Mm-hmm. So turning her against her friends.
Yeah.
Because that Malcolm said you wouldn't understand, that's like completely classic for like an abusive, toxic relationship. No one will understand they'll try to tell you not to,
Yeah. There's a lot at this point that I will completely back up Buffy in being suspicious of this guy. I think earlier it was a little bit too rushed, but again, you're right on the time period and people just not understanding online. But at this point, Buffy should be freaking trying to locate this guy and get this situation ironed out as fast as possible. I do think the line that she has to Willow is kind of an interesting little commentary, but she says something like you should meet him face to face, and then she says, before you become all obsessive. And I think in a way that could be twisted as a commentary on Willow's crush on Xander, because it's been pointed out that she is overly aware of Xander, right? That was a big thing in the pack where she monitors him all the time. And we already know that she decided one time to stare at Owen for 40 minutes to clock him brooding. Like, Willow has a little bit of an obsessive habit. And it comes out in different parts of the series, but I think in a weird way we can start pulling these little hints and looking at Willow's longer arc and see that there's already some things about Willow standing out that lead her down the journey she goes to, especially like in season 6, which I'm always excited.
Where she gets obsessive about things.
I'm always excited when I see subtle things and be like, ooh, there's a nugget of that character that's going to become really, really important later on.
But like how you just said that Buffy should be very concerned after this conversation and be trying to find out who this guy is, that's what she does in the very next scene, where she goes to the computer lab and finds Dave, talking to Dave about how you would trace someone online. And he answers her questions until he realizes that she is trying to find Malcolm, who Willow is developing a relationship with, and then immediately tries to warn her off. That's none of your business. Stay away. Leave Willow alone.
And that's the real, like, Moloch is a really creepy concept, and I think had it been done in a slightly different context without all of the commentary on technology and the weird robot demon at the end, I think there could have been some really interesting things done with his power of persuasion. But he's got these two, like, he's got Dave and Fritz so emotionally invested in this idea of bringing him back and him and Willow being together, and it's just, it's real creepy.
Yeah. And then there's a scene in the script book that's cut out from the show. At the end of this conversation with Dave, Buffy notices his hands, like he lifts his hands up and she notices them, and all of his fingertips have Band-Aids on them. And she's like, your hands, what's wrong with them? And he goes, oh, it's nothing. I've just been typing a lot. And I thought, how are you typing so much that you get Band-Aids on the tips of all your fingers? But yeah, they cut that out, but whoa. That's a lot of typing.
That is a lot of typing.
So, and now Buffy, she's on the scent. She knows something's happening, and she goes to Giles. And they discuss it. And Giles, I love this line.
I really don't know how to advise you. Things involved in the computer fill me with a childlike terror. Now, if it were a nice ogre or some such, I'd be more in my element.
An ogre is easier for Giles to deal with than a computer. He truly is an old-fashioned guy. I think there's a subtle thing in here as well where Giles is just like, yeah, I believe you, I'm with you, this is just not my element kind of scenario, which I respect after a couple of scenes that we've already had where Buffy's come up with something that seems kind of preposterous and Giles is like, well, that's not it, and then it turns out that absolutely is what's happening. So here Buffy is just like, this is what's happening, and Giles is like, okay, I've learned to trust you at this point, which I appreciate.
Which at one point in this episode, he actually says, I do trust you.
I think in this scene. Yeah.
Yeah. There'll be times later when he doesn't trust her, but generally he does.
Yeah.
They end up discussing what she can do and decide she's going to follow Dave to wherever he goes next.
So yeah, Buffy tells Dave in dark glasses and a trench to CRD, which just has security galore. Like there's a large fence around the perimeter. There's security cameras. There's like an actual like armed guard at the front. So, you know, all kinds of warning flags here as well. But the security camera spinning and then revealing that Fritz is also watching makes me question why Moloch is investing so much time on someone like Fritz when clearly he has this entire facility under his thumb as well? Why is Fritz, the random, like, creepy high schooler, the one that he's just like, yeah, this is the guy I'm going to send after Buffy? Is it just because they both go to the same school? Is it because he has more control over him than others? Like...
Possibly.
Yeah.
It might be probably proximity.
Yeah.
When he decides to do something about Buffy, he uses the ones that are right there. Mm-hmm. In the school with her.
But... he's got armed guards everywhere and tasks a random high school kid to try to electrocute Buffy as a way of killing her. I don't know, maybe in researching electricity, he's like, oh, this stuff's super powerful, and he wants to play with it because he hasn't gotten to play with it yet. But it seems like something like an ancient demon would value people who are stronger and tougher as the warriors to take out this threat than someone like Fritz.
I would think so, too. Let's see, and the next scene we have Buffy back at the school and discussing what she found with Giles and Xander, which it seems in this episode they figure out something's going on and come to the decision to do something about it way faster than most of the other episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're like, oh yeah, something's happening, we're going to take care of it, and don't argue with each other about you don't know what you're talking about, or no, you're imagining things as much.
Mm-hmm.
But they're discussing this, and Xander knows what the CRD is. He says it's Calyx Research and Development, and used to be a big place people worked in Sunnydale until it closed. So, and that seems like information Xander would have.
Well, of the three, I mean, obviously, he's the one that's been there. Both the other ones are new. But it's just weird. Like, I mean, I don't know why they make such a big deal about Xander knowing something. That's something that he would obviously know. Because if it is, like, he talks about it being like the third largest employer in Sunnydale, and it's a huge facility. It really doesn't make sense in Sunnydale, but then again, most things don't make sense in Sunnydale.
No, they don't.
But it's a huge facility when you actually get inside the building.
I mean, it makes sense that it's closed. But yeah, they discuss it for a while and start talking about breaking into the place tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And then Miss Calendar, whose name is Jenny, not Nikki, come in and start saying she's going to check the new database. Buffy and Xander make excuses to leave.
Excuses for being in the library as well.
Yes. Yes.
Which I love how they have these like built-in excuses for being in the library, and Buffy's so natural at it, and then Xander's just the most awkward. But then Buffy, who was so natural in coming up with the excuse, starts yelling at Xander before they even leave the room.
Yeah.
I'm just like, Buffy, you're not making it any better.
And then we see Willow on the computer. We see Willow on the computer talking to Malcolm and asking him if they should meet.
I've never felt this way about anyone before, Willow.
I know what you mean. I feel like you know me better than anyone.
I do.
Do you think we should meet?
I think we should, soon.
I'm nervous.
This dates this more than anything, but Willow, like, they hadn't figured out how to film chat at this point. They hadn't figured out a way to make filming chat something that you could do. So they have the computer reading out Moloch's dialogue, and then Willow is literally talking as she types, which is just the funniest thing to me. Because
nobody
does that. But especially not, like, super big into computer people.
Like, but a lot of TV shows do that
all the time. Yeah, all the time. That was just their way of doing it, and I just think it's funny. I especially think that the sentences that are read that are supposed to be from Malcolm are almost at times given like random inflection. And I'm not sure if they were trying to do that as a way of conveying emotion, or if they were trying to do that as a way of making it like weird and electronic to where there were certain pauses in words. But I've listened to like text to voice things enough to know that, especially at this time, those pauses would not make sense there.
No, they would not. Because they don't do that now
Yeah.
in text to voice.
But I think there's literally a time where it's just like, I think we should meet. And then it pauses soon. And I'm just like, no.
No, that's not how that would work. And then we realized that she has talked to Malcolm about Buffy before because she says that Buffy doesn't understand how comfortable you can make me feel. And Malcolm types and replies, Buffy just makes trouble. That's why she got kicked out of her old school.
Yep.
And Willow, and I love this. I love that Willow is not so obsessed that she ignores things. Mm-hmm. Because we can conceivably guess or assume that this is the first red flag Willow has gotten. Yeah. The others have some, but this is the first one that Willow sees. Because she immediately is like, how did you know that?
And then it does this weird thing that, again, is very conversational. Where it's like, he says the wrong thing and then tries to cover it up by saying something else.
And that is another red flag for the toxic relationship, because he immediately tries to convince her, you must have mentioned it. And Willow's like, I guess. So now we have gaslighting.
The weird choice to be like, Moloch with his access to the internet and ability to calculate his responses very carefully accidentally leaked to just like, oh, I looked at her permanent record. And then he was just like, oh, wait. I mean, you mentioned it.
And Willow, I love her in this scene because she's like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. I have to sign off. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Like, she's not having any of it.
I also love, we gotta stop pointing out every little weird thing with computers, but her signing off is literally just turning off the monitor and walking away.
Yeah, that's not how it works. But I don't even think that's how it worked in the 90s.
No, it's not. I mean, there's clearly a computer underneath that monitor.
And then the next scene, we go back, and Miss Calendar and Giles are fighting in the library about computers versus books.
I wrote in my notes, get a room already.
Yeah. But Giles says it's a society in which human interaction is all but obsolete and people can be completely manipulated by technology. Mm-hmm. And I wrote in my notes, he has a point.
Yeah.
Because
too real, bro.
He has a point in the context of this episode. Mm-hmm. So when he said it, but I'm also thinking about today society. And I'm like, yeah, he so has a point.
Mm-hmm. Jenny has a good point, too, though. I love Jenny's line where she's just like, you just want knowledge kept in repositories where only a handful of white guys can get at it. Which is not, in fact, why Giles is so anti-computer, but it is something that is...
thing, yeah.
Yeah, it is a thing of having access to information be so publicly available was a big, knock on the internet for a while there. They didn't like people to have access to information, because if anybody had access to information, then anybody could educate themselves. And why would you want something like that?
But that's kind of unfair, because that's not what Giles' issue is.
Mm-hmm.
And then Miss Calendar picks up the book that has Moloch on the front, notices it is empty, and they discuss about why it's empty. Is it a diary? And Giles sees the cover and is like, yeah, it's nothing.
So does Jenny look at the cover? Do we see her look at the cover, or does she just randomly flip open the book, or was it already open?
I don't think she looks at the cover.
Okay, just saying. I was just like, clearly she would have been in the same position that Giles would have if she had seen the cover
who it was,
based on her reaction at the end of the episode. Yeah, I do love the line, though, as he's, distracted and walking away. He's just like, oh, it's so nice talking. And she's like, we were fighting.
And he's like, we must do it again sometime. It's awesome.
Such great interaction, such great chemistry. I really do enjoy those two.
And then the next scene, we have a school nurse who's talking to a teacher, and she's really upset. And she's like, I checked the computer. There's nothing in this file about being allergic to penicillin.
Which
And
is
so we
another
see,
kind of weird, petty thing that Moloch's doing. I almost wonder how much control Moloch really has over what he's doing, or if he's just, like, playing with everything and messing up everything without really realizing what he's doing, because it's just such a different world from where he came from. But it seems like really random choices for him to make and be like, oh, I'm gonna,
make this kid sick.
have an allergic reaction. That'll show him.
Buffy is walking by and we see Dave, who is very twitchy and tells her Willow's looking for her and is in the girls' locker room where Buffy goes. And there's a scene where we see Fritz in there turning on one of the showers. And I noticed that the shower knobs are like so nasty.
Oh, I wrote that this is the scariest locker room ever. After finding dead guys in the locker, how have they not invested in more lighting in this place? Everything is just awful in this locker room.
It is, but the shower knobs are like dirty, gross.
Yeah. It's
like crusty and stuff. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're like supposed to look like that or they're just that old, but they look really, really horrible. And Buffy hears the water going. She goes to it and walks to turn the water off, saying, this is how droughts happen. All of a sudden, she hears Dave yell, Buffy, really loud, turns around, and she sees that there are wires, live wires, hanging by the water. So she dives out of the way and just barely keeps from being electrocuted.
So Dave returns to the class and he yells at the computer that he can't do it. He's not the guy. And this is probably the creepiest section of this episode.
Yeah.
I think if the cutting had been handled a little bit different, I think it could have been a contender. But this is actually executed in a way that's really terrifying, where Moloch literally writes the suicide note for Dave as Dave watches it. Really, actually, very well executed in what's about to happen, and just awful to think about. But then Fritz
is all just back here grinning. I get to kill somebody. He's all like, yay! Then we have the library, and it's Xander, Giles, and Buffy again. And they're talking about what just happened to Buffy. And Giles says if she'd been anyone but the Slayer, she wouldn't have been okay.
Mm-hmm. Which, this is just my curiosity speaking here, but would the Slayer be less susceptible to electrocution? I mean, when I really think about it, the Slayer,
I would guess.
The Slayer has healing abilities that are faster and strength and stuff like that. But if the heart just messes up, how does her Slayer abilities help with that?
Maybe he meant because she was able to jump away fast enough and no one else could do that.
Yeah, maybe.
Then Giles tells him he thinks he knows what's going on and shows them the book. Mm-hmm. And that it's empty now. But he knows who Moloch is on the book. He had recognized him and tells them that he had been trapped in the book.
And Moloch is inside that book?
Not anymore.
You released Moloch?
Way to go.
I actually think that's hilarious considering how many demons and bad guys these guys release over the years. Like all of them. Because all three of them do it. Giles is like, I don't know who could have read it. It wasn't even in English. And then Buffy immediately catches on, which I guess isn't surprising since she's the one that found the book in the first place and gave it to Willow. But she realizes that it was scanned. And then they all of a sudden realize that he is in the computer.
I love that they immediately realize that he's in the computer. Immediately realize that that also means that if he can travel through the internet, then he's everywhere, basically. But then, to show their ignorance, and I'm totally fine with this, I think this is actually pretty funny, because these three wouldn't know how to work a computer, but they decide they need to try to delete the file by dragging it to the recycling bin, which does nothing. That file is still on that computer.
To be fair, Giles does say that it may be a futile gesture.
Yeah, like they
but
realize,
we should try.
Yeah, might as well. But it's just like it's a futile gesture that they don't even do correctly.
And then they try to do that, and all of a sudden, Moloch's face fills the screen and says, "Stay away from Willow. It's none of your business." and the computer shuts itself off. And there's a line here that got cut out, but Xander goes, "What are you thinking?" And Buffy says, "I'm kind of wishing Willow's new boyfriend was just a circus freak."
Yeah. I'm trying to think back through the episode, but Buffy says here after Mullet comes up and is all pixelated and says stay away from Willow, she says, so that's what Malcolm looks like, but she says it in a way like that's already been established amongst the Scoobies, that they're the same, which they clearly just now figured out that Mullet went into the computer. So it seems like a weird reading. They should be reacting to the fact that they're the same person, but instead they're stating it like it's already a known fact.
Well, I think they had already realized that was what was happening.
I don't think so, though.
Don't you think?
Because they just now discovered that Moloch had even been released. Like, I'm really trying to think back through the episode. Like, they know something's weird going on with the computer people, and they know that a demon's been released and scanned the computer, but they never really verbally said, what if Malcolm's this demon?
I know why. They cut out the scene that shows that connection.
Okay.
Because there's a scene in the script book right after that happens. Buffy says, "Stay away." That's just what Dave said when I asked him about Willow and Malcolm. Mm-hmm. And Xander says, "What are you thinking?" And Buffy says, "I'm wishing Willow's new boyfriend was just a circus freak."
Okay, so that's all in that same scene.
But that was cut out. So that
Okay.
connection, we don't get to see them make that connection.
Yeah. Like, I hadn't noticed it while I was watching the episode. I noticed it while we were discussing it here. And I was just like, when did they, like, have the reality check that they like, oh, Willow is dating a demon? Because it seems like they fogged over that. Because they literally cut the scene out. I got you now.
So then we go back to them talking. And they discuss all the things that Moloch can do to ruin everything. And Giles is like, randomized traffic signals. And Buffy says, access launch codes for our nuclear missiles. And Giles says, destroy the world's economy.
I think I pretty much capped it with that nuclear missile thing.
All right, yours was best.
Which is just, it's hilarious the way they say it to each other.
Mm-hmm. It's got a lovely banter to it that I just love to see between those two.
And they decide that the first thing they need to do is find Willow. Mm-hmm. So Buffy goes to check the computer lab, and Xander and Giles are going to call her house. And in the computer lab, we find Dave, who is hanging from what is supposed to be a suicide, but we already know is murder.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I laugh again at a time that it's not, like, really a laughing matter. But, like, they shoot this in a way that Buffy comes in, and you see her look around the room and specifically, like, stop whenever she would be looking in the direction that Dave is in, just so they could have this reveal. She is surveying every area of that room except for the one corner that Dave is in. And it's just such a weird directorial choice.
She goes back and tells them, and they start trying to figure out how to put Moloch back in the book and out of the internet. Buffy and Xander decide they're going to go to Willow's house, and Giles is trying to figure out what to do. And Buffy says, you should get Miss Calendar. She can help you. Because Giles is all like, I don't like computers. Mm-hmm. And Giles says, how am I going to convince her there's a demon on the internet? And Buffy, you can tell she's taken charge. She's done with the discussion. She's just like, okay, fine. Come up with a better plan. Bye. Like, do it or don't, but we're going, you know.
Oh, yeah. I love it when Buffy takes charge. Yeah. 9 times out of 10, she is the one in charge, even when other people think that they are in charge. It's actually Buffy.
Yes.
But I just have in my notes, did they just leave Dave?
Well, they couldn't do much. But yeah, they just left Dave for...
They just left Dave. And then they're going to drag poor Jenny Calendar into this. And
like,
she might
Miss
go
Calendar
she might go to
probably
going to
find him
first. Oh. Okay.
And like, was she in the classroom? Because I doubt she has her own office.
Yeah.
So she shows up to help Giles. Was she at home? Did she come back to the school from home?
Yeah, but there's a good chance that she would go to her class either before or after everything went down. So there's a good chance that she's the one that actually ended up dealing with Dave.
That's a good point. They just left him there. Yeah. Okay, next scene is... it's Willow at her house. And she goes in and goes to her room, is like, putting her stuff down and getting all settled. And her computer says, you have mail. Which
Okay, I have a problem with this.
none of us have heard in so long.
I have a problem with this.
Okay.
It's another technology problem. I gotta stop pointing these out. But it's specifically in the previous scene, Xander said he didn't get a busy signal, so she wasn't online. Yet she shows up at home and has mail.
Oh, good point.
I was so excited about the dial-up reference, though, because I'm just like, oh, man, that was a thing.
Yeah. Which, and for her computer to do that, she'd have to be online.
Yeah.
So he should have got a busy signal. Oops.
I found continuity errors. Okay, moving on.
Yeah. She goes and she opens it, and it says, no more waiting. I need you to see me. And she's like, yeah, no, I'm still not sure what's going on with you. So she turns it off. She turns off the computer, and the screen goes black, and she goes back to her bed and starts pulling books out of her backpack, and the computer says, you have mail again. And she's like,
dun, dun, dun.
And right when we hear that, someone knocks on the front door, and it's Fritz, and he chloroforms her and kidnaps her.
Mm-hmm. So then we go back to the library, and Jenny's there, and Giles tries to, fumble around an excuse, and then this decides to say there's a demon in the internet, and Jenny knows.
Yeah. Which I think is trying to make us think that she might be, part of a conspiracy or something.
She's in on it,
So
too.
now we're supposed to suspect her.
Yeah.
Because she's new,
Yeah. Always suspect new people.
Yes, always suspect new people. Buffy and Xander are at Willow's house, and they get there, and they realize Willow's not there, and the door's wide open.
Mm-hmm.
They go and they see the message on her screen, and they're like, how is Willow going to see him? And they decide to go check out CRD.
And then we immediately go back to Jenny, and it's actually revealed all of her history of knowledge of demons and being a techno-pagan and all of this stuff, which is also a red herring that gets added to in the second season. But I gotta appreciate how much she knows her stuff. She is keeping up with Giles here.
Oh, yeah.
She's keeping up with Giles here. She's able to recognize the specific demon and be like, oh, man, I should have known that. She knows.
And Giles talks to her about how they're going to get the demon back in the book. And then we have Buffy and Xander at CRD, and they're trying to break in.
Mm-hmm.
We see Willow wake up on a gurney, and we hear Moloch's voice, welcome, my love, which is creepy.
Yeah.
And then we see him, and he is a giant robot Terminator type thing.
It's our very first robot of the series.
And we realize that's what CRD's been doing. They've been building Moloch a body.
Which is pretty ingenious. You gotta give Moloch props, because he is definitely, way out of his comfort zone when it comes to what's available technology-wise. But immediately gets access to the internet, recruits this research facilities building, and, gets a whole bunch of brainiacs to go in there and just build him a body. And that he does so very efficiently. Maybe he should rule our world, because he can get stuff done.
And Moloch starts telling her about how he knows everything. Everything in the world flows through him.
But nothing compares to having form again. To be able to walk, to touch. To kill.
And I think that's a weird comment, even for a demon who's been turned into a robot. Because he is just a robot. He doesn't have an actual body. He wouldn't be able to feel when he touched.
Yeah.
So, why does it matter?
Well, I think to kill is the thing that he really wants to be able to do, which is where he eventually finishes off. He wants...
he finishes off with to kill and puts his hand on Fritz's head, and Fritz just gazes up at him in worship, and then he breaks Fritz's neck. Mm-hmm. He likes to break necks, Moloch does.
I think this entire speech is great. I think Moloch is definitely Adam before Adam.
Oh, yeah.
This idea of him just having access to all information. Once they take that away and he's just a giant robot, then obviously you gotta just kill him. But there's something to be said about an all-knowing enemy as being one of the most terrifying things you can face.
Yeah, definitely. And if Moloch would have been a much harder enemy to defeat if he had kind of just stayed in the background and messed with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, coming all forward and
having a
everything.
demon who is specifically about vanity makes it to where he is very fallible and easily defeated in a situation where he should be one of the most impossible things to defeat in this whole Buffy verse, right? Having a demon in the internet, that would be so impossible to defeat, but he has this vanity, right?
And wants to have people worship him. Mm-hmm. So we go back to the library, and Miss Calendar and Giles are working on making a circle to put Moloch back in the book. And Miss Calendar sends out a request for help from her circle.
I really like this idea of forming a circle through the internet by pinging different people in different locations and making a circle that way. I think that was really ingenious.
Then we have Willow talking to Moloch again. He's explaining why he loves her and what he wants from her. And he just says, I want to give you the world. You created me. Mm-hmm. And she's very mad, saying, you lied to me. You pretended to be a person. We go back to Buffy and Xander trying to break in. And they break in and see Willow and Moloch on a computer.
But
screen,
first,
like a security camera.
Buffy just straight out punches a dude. And I love it.
Yeah, that knocks him out.
I love the line that Moloch says about, he's, knowing everything. And he talks about the man transferring money for a contract on his mother's life. And he's like, good for him. But it's one of those things that when you really think about it, is he meaning that he's paying a bribe to save his mother's life? Or is he literally, paying for his mother to be murdered?
I think he's paying for his mother to be murdered.
Okay, that's the reading I've always had on it.
Yeah.
But for some reason this time, I was just are they trying to present it in such a way that you think, oh, he's paying off a bribe, but then you think about it an extra layer and think, oh, wait, maybe he's actually paying to have his mother murdered, and that's why Moloch thinks it's good for him. But I, from the very first time I watched this, never thought of it as anything else but him paying to have his mother murdered.
Yeah. And there's a conversation that's cut out right after that where Willow says, you're evil. And Moloch says, is that a problem? Which I think is funny. I don't know why they cut it, because that's really fun. Is that a problem?
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting, because you have this idea where he says, he's going to give Willow the world. She created him, which isn't true at all. She scanned him in. She released him. She didn't create him, but maybe he's just this new version of him she created. I don't know. But yeah, he has, as much as he wants to be worshipped, he has this weird worship of Willow, which seems almost out of character for this demon. That this demon almost seems to be so infatuated with Willow and wants to worship Willow, and of course turns on a dime.
I was just saying, it doesn't last long.
Once it gets to that point in the episode, but building up to this doesn't seem like what this demon would be doing.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem in character for Moloch.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to worship somebody, worship Willow. I agree.
Yeah. Well, we go back to Buffy and Xander trying to get in, and they're right outside the door but can't get in it, and all of a sudden the lights go out and a gas starts filling up the room.
Yep. And then we're back again with Jenny and Giles, and the episode does the thing that makes me so mad. I would forgive this episode for so many things. But Giles suggests a computer virus, and then the writers do the stupidest thing that they could do, and you say something about, oh, you've been watching too many movies. The last thing that you want to do, if you're writing about technology and getting everything wrong, is point out that,
movies get it wrong. Now,
just let it rest.
I completely agree with you, but I was thinking, in the beginning of this, you said that you have a favorite line in this episode, And I thought it was going to be that.
Nope.
Okay.
I hate that line.
Okay. You hate that line. Well, hey, I was correcting that you feel very strongly about
I have
that
strong
line.
emotions about that line. Yes.
I knew that much. And then Giles starts doing the incantation to put Moloch back in the book, and we have Willow and Moloch talking again.
Let me leave.
But I love you.
Don't say that. That's a joke. You don't love anything.
You are mine.
I'm not yours. I'm never gonna be yours. Never.
And he kind of stops and puts his head down like he's sad. And then he lifts his head up and gets over it really fast and is like, pity.
Yeah.
And grabs her, and where he's fixing to kill her.
I love that. I actually really like Moloch. I think he's a really interesting villain. I wish that he had been handled a little bit differently in a couple of places, but I think he's a really interesting villain. And I love this turn where it looks like, aw, she hurt the evil demon's feelings. And he's just like, nope, I'm an evil demon. I'm okay.
Yeah. And then we have Giles and Miss Calendar, and they are putting the demon back, or trying to put the demon back. Yeah. And it goes back to Willow and Moloch, and he rears back and lets go of Willow and starts screaming. And then all of a sudden, we're on Buffy and Xander, and the gas stops and the lights come on, and Buffy tries to open the door, which is now unlocked, and they go in. And Buffy runs up and does a flying kick to Moloch's chest.
Ow! Guy's made of metal.
I love that. I love everything about the composition of that stunt where she just kind of flies at him and then immediately like drops and she's like, ah, God, made of metal.
Yeah.
But not nearly as much as I love Giles's commitment to this spell, which is completely being done virtually, yet he is still just shouting out those words with such conviction. And oh man.
When it's being typed into the computer. Yeah.
Jenny's just got, like, get a load of this guy, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Moloch screams and the Scoobies run, and then the spell is complete. Jenny says he's out of the net, and then Giles checks the book.
Before the spell is complete, we see lights flashing and sparks flying out of the computer. Because, that happens, and then your computer still works.
Well, I said we needed to stop referencing every little weird technological bit.
I can't help it.
It's just
I can't help it. Yeah.
But yeah, he's not in the book.
Before that happens, we see Xander helping run out, and a scientist comes running toward him, and Xander punches him full in the face. And as they all get to the door, Xander goes, I got to hit someone.
He's so proud. He's so proud.
Yes, he is so proud.
This is such a frantic little bit of events.
Yeah.
So, the Scoobies are trying to flee, and this is a very, comical section, right? They open up the door, and then they're like, nope, close the door, and they run. But my favorite is when Moloch straight up breaks through the wall like the freaking Kool-Aid Man.
Yeah, he so does.
It's just, just casually walks through a wall, hits Xander. Somehow Xander isn't instantly dead, even though this, thing is able to walk through walls like nothing. Buffy gives him a full-on, full-power kick and does nothing to him. And then he punches Xander in the face, and Xander's just kind of, knocked down for a few seconds. I mean, he's not even knocked out, really, because he gets up just a few seconds later. But I'm just like, Xander's instantly dead there.
Yeah. And Moloch is very upset.
I was omnipotent. I was everything. Now I'm trapped in this shell.
Malcolm! Remember me, your girlfriend? I think it's time we break up, but maybe we can still be friends.
And at this point, Willow grabs a fire extinguisher and starts yelling at Moloch about breaking up while hitting him with the fire extinguisher.
Just going to town, too.
And he throws her out of the way and goes back to Buffy and backs Buffy into a corner. She can't get away. and he says he's going to crush her, and then Buffy realizes she's standing in front of a fuse box.
Mm-hmm.
Malik pulls back his arm to hit Buffy, and she ducks, and he slams his fist into it and electrocutes himself because, he's a big robot now.
I wish they hadn't made this as obvious, where she's just like, I'm going to stare at it for a second, step in front of it, and stare at him and be like, take your best shot. Because this demon literally had access to all, like, knowledge on the internet just a little bit prior. You think he would know what an electrical box is.
Right.
He'd be like, oh, probably shouldn't punch that, huh? I'll just grab you instead.
But he doesn't see it, so he punches it. And he dies. And I'm curious to what they did with, like, the shell, the robot shell. Did they just leave it there?
No, Willow took it home to study it. That's what Willow does with robots.
That is what she does with robots. But, like, and all this stuff at CRD, this closed factory or whatever it was, like, they just leave everything there and just go home, wait for someone to find it.
All of the scientists that have been pulled in to put together the robot, I'm sure, are the ones that brought in the equipment. So they'll just be like, well, that was a weird couple of days. Let's get rid of all this stuff and go back to our normal lives.
Yeah, like, do they remember it? Do they not remember it? It's cool. And then we have our next scene with Miss Calendar and Giles. In this scene is one of the best things Giles ever says. Like, the most charming thing he ever says. I love it.
Yeah. So before we get to that, though, this is, again, an example of season 1 having some really dark, terrible things happen, and then at the end of the episode just not paying attention. But, like, 2 of Jenny's, like, top students has just died horrible deaths. And she's just, like, teasing with Giles in the computer class at the end of this episode.
Well, Dave obviously committed, or they think he committed suicide in the computer classroom, and she would have probably been the one to find that and everything, which brings up the issue of whether or not Buffy ever tried to tell his family that he didn't commit suicide, he was murdered, and how she would ever explain that.
Yeah, like, I don't think you could. I think that family just believes that their son committed suicide, because how are you going to explain anything else?
But as for Fritz, he's probably... Yeah. For Fritz, he's just missing. Yeah. Because his body's at CRD. Nobody's found that. Yeah. As far as we know.
I think they probably would have communicated with Jenny how both of them died, actually.
Actually, maybe not, because at this point, Jenny doesn't really know anything about Xander, Willow, and Buffy.
Yeah, maybe.
She only knows that Giles knows about demons and stuff. She doesn't know anything about the teenagers yet.
I don't know if they ever have, like, a reveal of that, though. Is there a reveal in Prophecy Girl where she's... Oh, yeah, because she's like, yes. Buffy's the Slayer. She's so little. Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if she knows anything about it before the end.
Yeah.
But at this point, she doesn't know anything about the students knowing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they would have told her.
Yeah. They probably... Yeah, you're right. They probably wouldn't want to reveal that Xander, Willow, and Buffy are all involved. I mean, obviously, she knows about Buffy already, because we find out about that through a shoehorned backstory that they didn't plan for in season 2. But Giles wouldn't know that she knows about Buffy, and it's revealed later that but they kind of have the...
We know she knows there's a Slayer, but do we know that she knows it's Buffy? I'm going to have to pay attention to this.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the timeline of all of this stuff. I always assumed that she knew everything about everybody when she came in. Like, she just knew who Giles was, who Buffy was, and who Angel was, and the areas that she needed to be focused on.
I'm going to pay real close attention and see if I can see any hints about that, because I don't know.
Well, and there may just not be any, because they literally, I mean, it's confirmed by Joss Whedon himself that they just made up that backstory like partway through season 2 without having actually seeded it at all. But okay, so the Giles line here is my favorite quote from this episode. One of my favorite
pretty
quotes
awesome
from Buffy of all time. Like, one of my aspirations is to open a bookstore. If I did that, I would have this quote on the wall of the bookstore. I just love it that much.
I would totally I'd patronize your bookstore, but I would totally go to a bookstore that had this on the wall just because it had it on the wall.
Yeah, it's such a great, great quote.
Smell is the most powerful trigger to the memory there is. A certain flower or a whiff of smoke can bring up experiences long forgotten. Books smell musty and rich. The knowledge gained from a computer it has no texture, no context. It's there and then it's gone. If it's to last, then the getting of knowledge should be tangible. It should be smelly.
And then we cut out to the schoolyard where Buffy and Xander are trying to cheer up Willow. I know you said I don't need to be trying to wish away Buffy's boyfriends, but Buffy says, in absolute sincerity here, that the one boy that she had the hots for since she moved to Sunnydale turned out to be a vampire. So I'm just going to say...
And for the record, in this part, in my notes, it says, what about Owen?
Just saying. I think that's Owen love spell confirmed.
Well, possibly. She completely forgot about Owen. And here is another scene where Buffy and Willow are completely dressed for different seasons. Like, Willow is about to go backpacking on Mount Everest or skiing or something, and Buffy's on her way to the beach. It's like, what's going on? That's always bothered me in any kind of show when, like, characters are right beside each other and dressed for different seasons.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you doing this? But I've always had a thing with it, and I probably will point it out in every episode that they do it.
All right. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, they talk about all their previous crushes and how none of them will ever have a normal, happy relationship.
And ding, ding, ding. Praying mantis reference. Praying mantis reference.
Yes. We have to add that to our counter. Praying reference, praying mantis reference. That's hard to say.
It's been a long day.
Hey, well, that is I, Robot You, Jane. I think what I like so much about it is the way they do Willow's character. Like, she gets sucked in and you see all the kind of red flags, most of them all in one scene. But then the second there's something that Willow should notice, that's not directed at us, she does. She notices it and she immediately takes action.
Yes.
And it kind of shows how even as smart and self-aware as Willow is, she still kind of got sucked in and started changing her behavior and lying to her friends because it was before she noticed any red flags.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like how easy someone could get sucked into someone.
It's not a very elegant episode, but it is an episode that I think has a lot of really good ideas. Its execution is really poor in a lot of places, but conceptually, there's a lot of cool things going on here. I love the idea of a demon that just has access to all of humanity's knowledge, basically, right? That is a very terrifying thing. I love Moloch and
Oh, yes, very.
I love the commentary on toxic relationships and gaslighting and all of the issues that can happen when you get into a relationship with someone that really wants to monopolize you and pull you away from your friends, and how that's a very unhealthy thing to be involved in. I don't think it necessarily landed all of those notes as well as it should have, but it's not an episode that I'm mad at. I actually would say that it's kind of middle of the road for me probably when it comes to season 1. But it's not, I don't know if it really deserves the crazy amount of hate that it gets.
It's possibly one of the more boring episodes.
And I think that may be it. I think it's a little slow-paced and boring. And I think we both commented on it. We didn't have a lot of notes. We didn't have a lot to talk about. There's some good dialogue. There's some good character interactions. Of course, you love to see Jenny Calendar come in and all of this stuff that as fans of the entire series are excited for. But as a standalone episode, the concepts that are kind of neat aren't enough to carry the slower portions of this episode.
Although it does have that amazing scene where Giles talks about the books.
Yes. Which is always going to elevate this episode for me because holy crap. Yeah. I have said so myself. I have always been like, I am digital in so many places in my life. I've gone completely digital when it comes to almost every media I consume. but I still have shelves of books absolutely everywhere in my house because it's just really hard to replace a book. And Giles gets it.
Yep. And you can tell in that scene when he says that how charmed Miss Calendar is.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, oh.
How could she not be?
But
Holy
like,
crap.
who wouldn't? But yeah. Well, okay, I guess that is I, Robot You, Jane.
What's next, Kim? You know.
Puppet show.
Puppet show. I couldn't remember if it was Puppet show or Nightmares next. And we will meet Sid, who is just the most ridiculous Buffy character out there. Sure. I don't know. I can't think of a single person that could up Sid when it comes to ridiculous.
They try. It's a good concept, a demon and a puppet. But we will discuss that next week.
Yes. All right. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye. I was kind of losing my train of thought during that one because Adam just came in here to get a diaper. He had his hand to his lips and was like doing a very exaggerated slow walk, like almost cartoonish, and it was really funny. Like where you lift your legs really high, you know? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it was funny.